This is East Asia Tonight.
Good evening, I'm Ateli Edwards. Tonight's top stories from East Asia. A 10-year roadmap for a new global order agreed by the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The China-led bloc of global South nations inks 24 agreements and welcomes Laos as its newest dialogue partner. While the SCO gathering in Tianjin lending opportunity to the leaders of China, India and Russia to tighten trade and security ties amid growing tensions with the United States. Now, North Korean weapons manufacturing on full display as leader Kim Jong Un inspects a new automated missile production system before heading to Beijing on his first trip to China in years. Also, heat waves in Japan and a drought in South Korea as both nations swelter through their hottest summer on record. Ahead on East Asia Tonight, China rolls out a nationwide education campaign ahead of its World War II commemorations. A move observers say is an attempt to shape historical narratives. Across the strait in Taiwan, a similar initiative is playing out. Members of the Shanghai Cooperation Organisation, or SCO, have signed a joint declaration following a leaders' summit in Tianjin. Chinese state media says 24 agreements were inked, covering security, economic and cultural cooperation. Now, the bloc has also endorsed a new development strategy through 2035 and also unanimously accepted Laos as a dialogue partner. Now, Chinese President Xi Jinping sees the SCO as a new model for international relations amid global trade uncertainties triggered by U.S. tariffs. The leader has proposed a new global governance initiative as he warns that the house rules of a few countries must not be imposed upon others. CNA's Deborah Wong with this report.
The leaders of Russia and India walking hand in hand, then smiles and even laughter as they spoke with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The rare gathering taking place ahead of meetings at the SCO Leaders Summit in Tianjin on Monday. The cordial atmosphere between China and India as both face challenges with the West. Now, just last week, India's exports were slapped with 50% duties by the US over its purchase of Russian oil. Addressing the summit, Mr. Xi said the SCO offers a new model of international relations. He urged partners to reject Cold War mentality and bloc confrontation, a veiled swipe at the U.S. amid the Trump administration's global tariffs.
当前国际形势变乱交织，成员国面临的安全和发展任务更加繁重。中方愿同各方以这次会议为契机，总结经验，擘画蓝图，共同推动 上海合作组织迈上高质量发展、高水平合作新阶段，携手构建更加紧密的上海合作组织命运共同体。
Mr. Xi said China focuses on real action, pledging $280 million in grants to SCO member states this year, and another $1.4 billion in loans is set to go to the bloc's banking consortium over the next 3 years. Now, the number of SCO scholarships will also be doubled, and a new PhD program will be launched, cultivating top talent amid US visa restrictions on foreign students. Now, this is the largest gathering of the SCO since its formation in 2001, with over 20 world leaders taking part, but analysts have pointed to debates about the regional bloc's efficacy given tensions between some of its members, which, while not talked about in detail by Mr. Xi, did not go unmentioned. China and India have an ongoing border dispute which turned deadly during clashes in 2020. India also has ongoing tensions with Pakistan.
上海合作组织成员国都是朋友和伙伴。 要尊重彼此差异，保持战略沟通，凝聚集体共识，加强团结协作，把合作盘子做大。
The gathering takes place as many leaders will next head to Beijing to attend a massive military parade marking 80 years since the end of World War II. Deborah Wong, CNA, Tianjin, China.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has thrown his support behind Mr. Xi's ambition for a new global security and economic order. The Russian leader says the SCO has revived multilateralism, calling it a new system of stability and security.
Системы, которая пришла бы на смену отжившим евроцентричным и евроатлантическим моделям и учитывала бы интересы максимально широкого круга стран, была бы подлинно сбалансированной. А значит, не допускала бы попыток одних государств обеспечить свою безопасность за счет безопасности других.
Mr. Putin also defended Russia's war with Ukraine, blaming the West's attempts to bring Kyiv into NATO. He says the security alliance's eastward enlargement needs to be addressed for sustainable peace in Ukraine. Now, Mr. Putin also thanked China and India for their efforts in bringing an end to the crisis and updated Mr. Xi on his summit with U.S. President Donald Trump last month, which failed to produce a ceasefire. China and India are some of the top buyers of Russian crude, a move the West has criticized as enabling Moscow's war. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, speaking at the summit's plenary session, has described the SCO as a, quote, guiding light for multilateralism and inclusive world order. Now, he also stressed for the need for greater connectivity between the countries. Mr. Modi added that he is pleased that forum has been evolving as needs change, noting that centers are being set up to deal with issues such as organized crime, drug trafficking, and cybersecurity. Separately, Mr. Modi held talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin as he called for a swift resolution and lasting peace in the Ukraine war. Both leaders reaffirmed the depth of their ties, stating that both countries stood together in challenging times. Now, this comes a day after Prime Minister Modi met with Chinese President Xi Jinping, with both sides pledging to be partners. A top Indian official said that Mr. Xi made 4 suggestions to deepen ties, to which Mr. Modi reportedly responded positively. The warming ties between India and China come as trade tensions rise between New Delhi and Washington after U.S. President Donald Trump imposed steep 50% tariffs on Indian exports. Now, Ishan Garg, he joins us now live from New Delhi. Ishan, first up, let's walk us through just how significant India's moves are to strengthen ties with Russia as well as China.
Well, these moves are very important because India-China ties, many of the strategic affairs experts have said that when two of Asia's largest economies come together, they could provide a lot of economic opportunities for the 2.8 billion people in the two countries. But for the past 5 years, we'd not really seen New Delhi and Beijing really cooperate on anything. But things have changed in the past few months, and Prime Minister Narendra Modi's meeting with President Xi Jinping is the most crucial sign yet that New Delhi and Beijing are finally ready to make nice. We heard from the Prime Minister himself, who said that the meeting with President Xi Jinping and India-China relations, they are meant to be seen as a mark of India and China not looking at differences with each other, but now looking at areas where they can find common ground. This meeting also assumes importance because it's coming against the backdrop of India's tensions with the US rising because of the 50% tariffs imposed on New Delhi. And through closer ties with Beijing, analysts here say that New Delhi will be able to cushion some of the blow from those tariffs. New Delhi and Beijing already have trade exceeding $100 billion, but there are some elements like crucial fertilizers and chemicals which could be imported from Beijing, providing further boost to India's economy. The meeting with President Vladimir Putin is also significant because that is essentially a sign of New Delhi telling the United States that it's not ready to buckle under pressure from Washington, which has been calling on New Delhi to sever its energy and defense ties with Moscow.
Now, Ishan, we've seen Presidents Xi and Putin. They've put a pretty strong display of welcome for Prime Minister Modi. But optics aside, how has trade falling out with the U.S. actually affected India's global standings?
Well, the trade tensions with the U.S. have essentially given the world a signal that India's strategic autonomy is going to take charge of its foreign policy. This is something the Indian government has been saying in the past, that it is going to pursue relations that are best suited to its national interest. And at this moment, it seems as though the best relations for its national interest are a trade relation with China, an energy and defense partnership with Moscow. Through this visit to China and with bilateral meetings with President Xi and Vladimir Putin, New Delhi is giving the signal that it's not ready to be tied to one pole of the world, which also kind of supports India's message that the world needs to be a lot more multipolar. The world needs to have a place where countries can be multi-aligned and not non-aligned. And it's these two principles that have been shown that India has shown that it wants to work on as part of its foreign policy. The meetings with Vladimir Putin and Prime Minister Narendra Modi, they once again stressed the importance of New Delhi and Moscow ties, which once again is a message to Washington that New Delhi and Moscow are actually looking to engage a lot more in the future, while New Delhi also wants to portray itself as a power that is interested in building bridges with countries like China and Moscow and not alienating any countries in its ambit.
Hey, many thanks for that report. Ishan Garg speaking to us from New Delhi. Now, we've also got more analysis from Sumit Ganguly, Senior Fellow, Hoover Institution, Stanford University, who explains to us how New Delhi's rift with Washington is pushing it to restore strained ties with Beijing.
I would say this is basically a tactical move and a tactical accommodation because of the precipitous decline in the relationship between the United States and India over the last couple of months, ostensibly about tariffs and about India's dependence on Russian oil. The real reason that it really had to do with Modi's unwillingness to publicly or even privately in phone calls with Trump to concede that Trump had played this critical role in bringing about a ceasefire in early May between India and Pakistan. There is no evidence whatsoever that Trump played this critical role, but Trump wishes to be recognized as a peacemaker in the hope that this will be the first step towards the Nobel Peace Prize, which he so ardently craves. And Modi's categorical refusal to suggest that Trump played this vital catalytic role in bringing about a ceasefire between India and Pakistan has really gotten under Trump's skin.
Well, most leaders are staying on in China after the SCO forum wraps up today to attend Wednesday's military parade in Beijing commemorating the end of the Second World War. A North Korean leader, Kim Jong Un, will be present, marking his first visit to the Chinese capital since 2019. And ahead of his trip, state media KCNA showed Mr. Kim inspecting a new automated missile production system. The North Korean leader says the modernized process will bolster Pyongyang's production capabilities and increase the combat readiness of missile units. Mr. Kim also reportedly ratified 3 new long-term plans for fresh munitions and a defense expenditure proposal. A Yonhap news agency says that the North Korean leader has departed for Beijing. South Korean officials have said that Pyongyang is accelerating its production capabilities to supply Moscow with military equipment for the war in Ukraine. South Korea has suspended propaganda radio broadcasts to the north. The move is part of President Lee Jae-myung's continued efforts to ease inter-Korean military tensions. This is the first time the nation has halted the Voice of Freedom broadcasts in 15 years. The program features news on Pyongyang's regime, updates on South Korea's economic progress, and K-pop culture. It has been Seoul's long-standing tool of psychological warfare against Pyongyang. Since taking office in June, President Lee has sought warmer ties and vowed to build military trust with the North. Now, he put an end to loudspeaker broadcasts on the border, criticizing the North's regime shortly after his inauguration. He also proposed a meeting with North Korean leader Kim Jong Un and U.S. President Donald Trump. However, Pyongyang has rebuffed Mr. Lee's attempts at peace. It called him a hypocrite and said it's not interested in improving relations with Seoul. Time now for a short break, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, Washington's latest move casting uncertainty over the South Korean chipmaker's business. Shares in SK Hynix and Samsung tumble. And China preparing for an aging population by making more employers pay into pension plans for their workers. Hello there, you're watching East Asia Tonight, and it is now time for your business news with Roland Lim. So, Roland, Hong Kong stocks apparently having its best showing in 2 weeks with Alibaba leading the pack.
Right, you are. E-commerce giant Alibaba putting on its best showing in more than 3 years in Hong Kong, and investors turning their attention to the city currently lagging behind their mainland counterparts. Shares of Alibaba jumping in Hong Kong after its US-listed shares logged their best session in more than 2 years. Alibaba shares in Hong Kong, 18.5% higher, $137.10 Hong Kong a piece. The stock closed up nearly 19%, boosting the company's market value by more than $50 billion. Investors cheering the company's earnings report and its gains from China's AI boom, brushing aside concerns over stiff competition in shopping and in deliveries. New details on its AI chip development also boosting sentiment. Those gains helping the Hang Seng Index climbing 2.15% today. Shanghai Composite Tianjin component also gained for the day. A private survey showed that China's manufacturing activity in August expanded at its fastest pace in 5 months, helped by rising new orders. The rating dog China manufacturing PMI, previously known as the Caixin PMI, rose to 50.5, higher than July's reading. Remember, the 50 mark separates growth from contraction. The result was better than the official survey out on Sunday that showed that factory activity shrinking for the 5th straight month. New export orders, however, continued to contract in August, making it the 5th straight monthly decline. Economists say fundamentals may worsen in the second half of the year with front-loading easing off and U.S. tariffs weighing on growth. China is forcing companies to start paying into employee pension funds, part of a drive to prepare for an aging population and closing a long-standing loophole. Beginning today, the country's top court has banned informal arrangements between workers and employers to opt out of mandatory social insurance payments. While social insurance contributions are rising, but spending is rising faster. Payments into the Central Social Insurance Fund rose 5.2% in 24 to about $1.6 trillion, helped by subsidies. Yet payouts climbed 7%. And only about a third of China's 734 million workers made full contributions last year. The move aims to curb such abuses and support an older society. But businesses warn sudden enforcement could bite amid slower growth. Some firms are cutting roles, hiring part-timers who aren't covered, or rehiring pensioners. Others are reclassifying contracts to avoid contributions. Economists say Beijing must balance stronger safety nets as well as labor rights with the risk of fewer full-time jobs. Some policy experts urge lower contribution rates to help ease the shock. China's major listed state-owned miners of rare earth seeing their profits surge following export restrictions that help push up prices of the critical minerals. The rebounding prices and earnings have boosted the company's stocks. Share prices of China Northern and Shanghai has more than doubled as of Friday, while China Rare Earth, Xiamen Tungsten and rising non-ferrous metals were up between 36% and over 60%. The Chinese government imposed export restrictions for 7 of 17 key minerals in April as part of the tit-for-tat trade war with the US. The affected minerals, including scandium and yttrium, are needed in the production of several industrial products such as smartphones, electric vehicles, and missile defense systems. South Korea recording its highest ever monthly semiconductor exports, despite growing pressure from U.S. tariffs and other restrictions on the crucial sector. Overall shipments grew 1.3% in August from a year earlier to more than $58 billion. Semiconductor exports made up $15 billion of that. That's an increase by almost a third from last year. A strong demand from China and the exemption of chips from tariffs led to the surge. Other key exports, that's cars and shipbuilding, also performed strongly. Exports to the U.S., however, dropped 12% from a year earlier to around $9 billion as tariffs weighed on steel, auto, and machinery shipments, which plunged 32% and 14.4%. Officials say U.S. tariffs had a, quote, big impact. Now, Seoul says it'll mitigate U.S. controls on chips and unveil a support package for smaller exporters this month. But for now, Washington's back and forth on chip-related policies is weighing on South Korean firms. Its latest move knocked South Korea's chip makers into the red today. Top chipmaker SK Hynix 4.83% in the red, and rival Samsung Electronics 3% in the red. The U.S. Commerce Department has revoked waivers that previously allowed the two firms to use American technology in their Chinese plants. Now, that exemption was introduced under the Biden administration. It spared some foreign chip makers from the strictest export controls. Both Samsung and SK Hynix now face a 120-day grace period before those waivers expire. After that, they'll need a license every time they buy U.S. chip-making gear for their plants in Xi'an and Wuxi in China. Experts warn that it'll make it difficult for the South Korean chipmaker to upgrade their factories in China, potentially eroding their competitiveness. It also underscores how the Trump administration is moving beyond narrow technical restrictions to using export controls as a geopolitical lever. It's a big deal for Korean chip giants. China accounts for a sizable share of Samsung and SK Hynix memory chip output. Analysts warn the change could ripple across the global chip supply chain, with foreign firms in China supplying about 10% of the world's computer memory chips last year. South Korea's retail investors are losing faith in Tesla's stock. They've ramped up their selling amid growing disillusionment with the EV car maker. Individual investors sold a net $657 million worth of Tesla shares in August. That's the largest outflow in more than 20 months. The exchange-traded fund, TSLL, also saw more than $550 million withdrawn in August, its biggest monthly outflow since early 2024. Still, Tesla remains the top foreign stock among Korean retail traders, who hold about $22 billion of the company's share. Nvidia ranks a distant second. Now, South Koreans are turning to more volatile bets, with $12 billion surge into U.S. crypto stocks and leveraged ETFs this year. A Bitmine immersion technology, seen as a proxy for Ether, has drawn nearly $260 million of net inflows since July, making it the most purchased overseas security in South Korea. The boom seen as a result of more clarity in regulations and the potential for higher returns. And that'll do it for business. Oteli, back to you.
Thanks so much for that, Roland. Well, let's go for a break now, but coming up next on East Asia Tonight, China showcasing its military might and diplomatic clout as it prepares to mark 80 years since the end of World War II. We examine the significance of this display. And we also delve into how wartime history is told and even reshaped in China and across the Taiwan Strait. This is East Asia Tonight, and here are the headlines we're following. A 10-year roadmap for a new global order agreed by the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. The China-led bloc of global South nations inks 24 agreements and welcomes Laos as its newest dialogue partner. The SCO gathering in Tianjin lending opportunity to the leaders of China, India and Russia to tighten trade and security ties amid growing tensions with the United States. And North Korean weapons manufacturing on full display as leader Kim Jong Un inspects a new automated missile production system. Yonhap reports he is now on his way to Beijing in his first trip to China in years. Well, China is gearing up for a massive military parade and other activities on Wednesday to mark 80 years since the end of World War II. Officially, it's known as the victory in the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression and the World Anti-Fascist War. But what exactly does this mean? Well, let's break things down. On September 2nd, 1945, Japan signed the Instrument of Surrender, marking an official end to World War II. The day after, September 3rd, is recognized by China as Victory Day, the end of a brutal 14-year fight, or as China puts it, its resistance against Japanese aggression. Officials say more than 35 million Chinese died. 69 years on, in 2014, China's legislature passed a resolution officially designating September 3rd as a day to mark Japan's defeat. Now, Chinese leaders, including President Xi Jinping, attended a commemorative ceremony that year. It was a time of strained ties between China and Japan, with disputes over wartime history and territory in the East China Sea, issues that remain till today. Now, the anniversary took on greater prominence in 2015. To mark the 70th victory anniversary, China declared a one-off public holiday and held an unprecedented military parade. It was the first to be held for an event other than National Day. Also, the first parade with President Xi at the helm, 3 years after taking on the top job. Now, in a speech, the Chinese leader said that the parade was held to remember the lessons of history, as he stressed the decisive role China played in a global fight against fascism. He also announced China would downsize its military by 300,000 troops, pledging the country will remain committed to peaceful development. But the showcase highlighted China's rapid military progress amid a growing rivalry with the United States. The military parade will be keenly watched by international observers, but across the strait, the Taiwan government has stopped officials from attending. The commemorations have sparked a to and fro of words between Beijing and Taipei about their competing historical narratives of World War II. For more, we are joined by CNA's Victoria Jen live from Taipei. Victoria, firstly, why has Taiwan banned officials from attending the parade?
Well, Taiwan's decision to ban officials from going to Beijing's commemoration is very deliberate. On one hand, it avoids sending mixed signals at a time when cross-strait tensions are already running high. But more importantly, Taipei doesn't want to be folded into Beijing's version of history, a story that frames the war as a shared Chinese victory against Japan. Now, for the DPP government here, that risks reinforcing China's claim that Taiwan is part of China. Beijing, as expected, fired back. The Taiwan Affairs Office accused Taiwan of political manipulation and warned that so-called Taiwan independence is doomed to fail. Chinese state media outlets also called the move shameful and a betrayal of history. At the same time, China tried to highlight that it had invited Taiwanese people to attend, saying the victory should be remembered together across the strait. So while it looks like just a ban on a ceremony, it's really about history and identity, in another way that Taiwan is trying to draw a line between itself and Beijing.
Now, Vic, Taiwan, what's interesting to note is that Taiwan actually did mark the end of World War II, but that was back in May, and that was a significant change in Taiwan's policy, isn't it?
That's right. That was a big shift. Taiwan had never marked victory in Europe Day before. In the past, World War II was remembered mainly through the old KMT narrative. China fighting Japan and Taiwan presented as part of that broader Chinese victory. By marking VE Day, analysts say that the government is trying to place Taiwan alongside the global allies instead of inside Beijing's version of history.
Right.
那这个很明显的是赖清德的一个意识形态，因为赖清德他们不承认对日战争的这一个概念啊，因为他们认为二次大战的时候台湾并没有参加第二次世界大战啊，如果有那也是日本，而不是台湾。
Beijing, of course, didn't take it lightly. Chinese officials said September 3rd is the true victory over Japan Day. They accused Taiwan of distorting history, and state media even called Taiwan's approach a blasphemy, saying that it insulted war heroes and betrayed the nation. So what may look like just a ceremony on a different date is actually a political statement. It speaks to Taiwan's identity at home, and it adds another layer to the tensions that we're seeing with Beijing today.
Well, thanks so much for that report. CNA's Victoria Jen live in Taipei. From exhibitions to films and memorials, China has rolled out a nationwide public education campaign ahead of its World War II anniversary on Wednesday. Analysts say it's been a chance for Beijing to promote unity and to shape how the world views its war history. CNA's Tan Sihui reports.
In a room full of journalists, all eyes were on this 92-year-old. His medals, a testament to his efforts fighting the Japanese in the Second World War and the difficult times endured.
林口西山打仗，哎呀，那一看见，因为那是苏联的红军将咱们这个抗联的部队，也是几万人，日本人也是2-3万人。
Even as Mr. Young's hearing has started to fade, it seems his memory has not. The Heilongjiang province native still recalls when the Japanese surrendered in 1945.
哎呀，我家乡的人民，不管是村里镇里的，那都是除了家里上街上欢呼啊！我们是中国人了。
Accounts like Mr. Young's feature at a special exhibition in this museum in northeastern China's Shenyang. It marks 80 years since the end of World War II. The museum itself dedicated to the September 18 incident, a staged railway blast in 1931 that Japan used as a pretext to invade Manchuria.
从1931年之后呢，应该说东北人民就在白山黑水中，奋起抵抗，应该也成为了抗日战争的起点，并揭开了世界反法西斯战争的序幕。1985年被选为
The museum was among the sites shown to local and foreign media by officials ahead of its Victory Day military parade on September 3rd.
From museums and memorials to former battlefields and even old factories like these, key World War II sites have been preserved and remain scattered across China, not just here in the northeast. And as the nation marks the 80th anniversary of the war, these stand not just as historical landmarks, but also a key part of national education.
In Beijing, a newly reopened World War II museum is drawing visitors from across China. The carefully curated exhibition highlights the war's human and economic toll, also the pivotal role of Chinese forces in the global resistance.
对于我来讲，最大的震撼就是在那么困难的情况下，付出这么大的牺牲的情况下，没有一个人选择去放弃。
要给小宝宝培养爱国精神，因为怀着他的时候，我们也来过2次。
But the writing of history has not always been straightforward. In 2017, China revised its textbooks to recognize a longer 14-year period of Chinese resistance from 1931. Another debate has been the role that communist and nationalist forces played in the fight.
Those elements will be very much in the background, if mentioned at all. So, in part, this creation of patriotism, of nationalism is what the whole event is about as well.
But beyond the politics, veterans like Mr. Young hold a deeper hope.
这个现在来看，中日两国还是比较友好的，对我来说是最大的愿望。
His daughter agrees, believing that understanding history can lead to peace for future generations. Tan Sihui, CNA, Liaoning Province, China.
Well, in other news, rescuers in Afghanistan are racing against time to find survivors after a deadly earthquake in the country's east. More than 800 people have been killed and at least 2,800 others are injured. Authorities warn that the toll could climb further. Well, the 6.0 magnitude earthquake struck last night in Kunar province near the city of Jalalabad. The epicenter was in a mountainous area close to the border with Pakistan. The quake struck at a shallow depth of 8 kilometers, which can be more destructive. Tremors were felt as far away as Kabul and Islamabad. Several aftershocks followed.
دا د مزار دره د نورګل ولسوالۍ ده غازی آباد کلی دی دا ټول ړنګ شوی دی د شپې 12 بجې زلزله وشوله ماشومان دلته ایسار دي غټان ایسار دي سپینګیري ایسار دي په خبره پوه شولې زمونږ ضرورت دی وته کسانو ته زمونږ ضرورت دی مرستو ته زمونږ ضرورت دی چې دلته موږ سره مرسته وکړي موږ لري شي موږ سره کومک وکړي خبره پوه شولې زمونږ واړه ایسار دي زنانه ایسار دي سپینګیري ایسار دي ماشومان ایسار دي خبره پوه شو مړي ایسار دي زمونږ اوس دونه څوک نشته چې دا موږ سره راوباسي.
Rescue operations are underway with Taliban authorities and the United Nations mobilizing efforts. Medical teams are also treating the wounded. Dozens of flights have transported the dead and survivors. But rescue efforts have been complicated by the region's narrow mountain roads. Roads are blocked and communication affected, hampering access to remote communities. Entire villages have been flattened, with homes of mud and brick unable to withstand the tremors. Now, masses are feared trapped under the rubble. Authorities from the Taliban-run government have requested aid from international organizations. Condolences have poured in for victims of the quake, including from the United Nations' Antonio Guterres and Chinese President Xi Jinping. Aid group IFRC calls for more preparedness on the ground to help navigate crises in the quake-prone country.
We need to start thinking about, preparedness and really looking at, prevention and ensuring that we can support Afghans the best way sort of possible, particularly the Afghan Red Crescent Society around their community-based modalities and most sort of local mechanisms that they have in place to support, Afghans with early warning around anticipatory action, around gaining better understandings of these repeat crises that keep coming in.
Coming up next on East Asia tonight, Hong Kong police arrest some 400 people, including minors, and seize hundreds of kilograms of drugs in a citywide crackdown. And contestants in Japan battle it out in a unique competition for a good cause. Hong Kong police have arrested hundreds of people, including a 13-year-old boy, in a citywide crackdown on drugs. Police say the minor was caught with 4 capsules suspected of containing the banned substance etomidate, an anesthetic agent. Well, officers in a 7-week operation arrested 418 people aged between 13 and 73. The raids netted more than 300 kilograms of suspected drugs worth about $22 million. The haul included liquid etomidate and more than 2,700 cartridges alongside cocaine, cannabis and heroin. Authorities are concerned that dealers are increasingly exploiting minors for drug trafficking. Under Hong Kong's drug laws, trafficking carries a maximum penalty of life imprisonment and a fine of $640,000. South Korean President Lee Jae-myung has called for broad structural reforms to ensure gender equality as the country marks its 30th Gender Equality Week. In a Facebook post, Mr. Lee also emphasized the need to work to correct misconceptions, adding that structural discrimination still persists in many areas despite efforts to achieve gender equality. The government designates 1 week each year as Gender Equality Week, during which various campaigns and programs are held to raise public awareness. Though some progress has been made, South Korea continues to record the largest gender wage gap among member states of the OECD, with Korean women earning 29% lesser than men last year. Recent criminal cases linked to gender inequality in the country has also garnered international attention, such as the Nth Room case and the deepfake crisis. The issue is further spotlighted by the 4B movement, which gained traction over recent years in its protests against rampant misogyny and patriarchal structures in society. South Korea has recorded its hottest summer, beating previous highs set just last year. President Lee Jae-myung has declared a state of emergency in Gangneung City, where the main reservoir has fallen to an unprecedented low. It's not the eastern city's first drought, but it is the first time an emergency has been declared. Gangneung's location on the leeward side of the Taebak mountain range sees it receive rain in short concentrated bursts that usually flow out to sea. Well, city officials have cut off 3/4 of household meters and stopped the supply of agricultural water as the Obong Reservoir fell below its threshold. More than 70 water tankers have been deployed. Experts say the city will face persistent droughts unless its water management system is overhauled. Well, Japan, meantime, is also sweltering through its hottest summer since record-keeping started more than 100 years ago. Well, authorities have issued heat stroke warnings in 35 of the country's 47 prefectures, stretching from northern Tohoku all the way down to Okinawa. A heat wave that's gripping much of Japan saw the mercury topping 40 degrees over the weekend. Forecasters expect temperatures to reach 38 degrees in western Japan today and around 36 in Tokyo and Osaka. But while much of the country swelters, conditions in the north are set to turn unstable. According to authorities, Hokkaido could see up to 120 millimeters of rain through tomorrow. Officials are warning of possible landslides, flooding, tornadoes, and even hail. Meanwhile, across the Pacific, the U.S. is bracing for the worst of the hurricane season amid federal budget cuts that could pose a risk to the country's forecasting systems. Well, there are fears that staffing shortages could leave communities more vulnerable as climate-fueled disasters grow more intense. Ira Spitzer has more from San Francisco.
Hurricanes like Milton, Ian, and Helene have pummeled the U.S. in recent years, a sign that extreme storms are no longer rare events, but recurring disasters. This year's Atlantic hurricane season is forecast to be intense again, with federal officials predicting as many as 5 major hurricanes. National Weather Service Director Ken Graham warns that the most dangerous storms can escalate with little warning.
Every Cat 5 that hit this country was a tropical storm or less 3 days prior. The big ones that hit this country are fast.
Every coastal community.
Preparedness is critical, but the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which oversees the National Weather Service, has lost more than 800 employees this year. Some local forecast offices say they are operating at just 60 to 80% of their normal staffing levels. And meteorologists like John Morales of NBC6 Miami are raising the alarm.
We may be flying blind, and we may not exactly know how strong a hurricane is before it reaches the coastline.
And it's not just hurricanes. In the western U.S., fire season is underway. Accurate and timely forecasts are critical for fire crews and evacuations. Here in California, emergency officials rely on National Weather Service data to issue things like red flag warnings or evacuation alerts. If those forecasts are delayed or inadequate, it could make a bad fire season even worse. Experts say early warnings are among the most effective ways to protect people and property. Alice Hill, a former White House climate advisor, says cutting those systems could come at a steep cost.
It's hard to underestimate the importance of accurate forecasting for preparedness for any type of disaster. You know, that warning gives people time to get to safety, to evacuate, but also to put shutters on their homes.
U.S. officials insist hurricane forecasting remains a top priority, citing improved satellite technology and expanded aircraft operations. But critics like Michael Gerard from Columbia Law School aren't convinced.
The U.S. government had a very robust weather forecasting system. Under President Trump, this has been greatly weakened. Many people have been laid off. Others have taken buyout offers. And we have a far weaker system of weather forecasting and therefore preparedness than we did before Trump came in.
In an extreme weather event, every minute of advanced warning is critical. But as the U.S. heads into another high-risk season, fears are growing that there could be trouble ahead. Ira Spitzer, CNA, San Francisco.
Well, it looks like South Australia will be banning fish-shaped soy sauce containers from today as part of a wider ban on single-use plastics. It's the first in the world to enforce this measure. Well, the new law covers pre-filled polyethylene containers with a cap, lid or stopper and containing less than 30 millimeters of soy sauce. The South Australian Environment Minister says they are used for just seconds but are usually discarded due to their small size and remain in the environment for decades or centuries even. Well, plastic sachets will be allowed, but the government hopes bulk bottles or dispensers will be used instead. Well, the ban builds on a law passed 2 years ago, putting an end to single-use carrier bags, straws, drinks, stirrers, among other plastics. Now, these fish-shaped soy sauce bottles have become a symbol of modern bento or lunchbox culture. Known as shoyu tai or soy sauce snapper in Japanese, it was invented in 1954 and became widespread with the development of cheap industrial plastics. Now, Trevor Thornton from Deakin University weighs in on the ban and why he thinks South Australia stands out in its environmental initiatives.
They do end up in the litter. They're often used at beaches or parks where we go into the water courses, etc. It's also the tiny little red cap that is often found in the beaches and in the litter stream, in the waters, etc. So it's a good start. And it's also what we often refer to as a gateway issue, that a lot of people have been talking about them. And if governments don't do anything, then the community is less reluctant to look at other initiatives to reduce plastics, reduce resources, etc. South Australia has actually been quite an innovator in terms of looking at a whole range of different environmental issues associated with waste, etc. They were the first state in Australia to have the container deposit scheme many years ago before the other states have followed. So it's really a case that they are innovative, they do think ahead, and they have governments which have been, I guess, more proactive in trying to look at issues and enacting legislation such as this one to ban them. The same with the other single-use plastics. So very innovative state.
And finally, do you have the legs for this quirky competition in central Japan for a shot at winning tasty local treats? It's all in the name of good fun and charity. Well, hundreds of people signed up for this slipper kicking contest that's been held annually since 2006. Participants need only pay 20 Japanese yen or 14 US cents to see who can kick their slippers the furthest. Organizers say this year's winner kicked his slipper 21.9 meters but fell short of the record of 24.5 meters in the general category. Well, all proceeds go to a non-profit organization that supports activities in children's hospital wards. And that wraps up East Asia Tonight this Monday. Don't forget your headlines anytime at cna.asia. And you can always find us on Facebook and YouTube. Thanks for watching.